told your friend you're not okay.
Are you ready to see a moment that even the studio staff will get goosebumps? Welcome back to K-pop Update, home to the most honest, most human, and most emotional moments from our beloved idols. Today, we're taking you behind the studio doors, right to the moment Taehyung requested a sound adjustment before performing Love Me Again for Jin's stage. And trust us, what was happening inside was far more than just a rehearsal. This was the homecoming of a legend. The practice studio that night was simple, but the atmosphere was distinct. The dim lights cast soft shadows on the polished wooden floor, while the sounds of audio equipment, staff whispers, and light footsteps filled the space. But amidst all the subtle noise, Taehyung sat quietly, cross-legged, eyes closed, as if retrieving the pieces of himself he'd left behind on stage before his enlistment. In his silence, there was something that felt like a new beginning. Silently, he tidied the cable of his red in-ears, making small movements that conveyed how deeply he'd longed for this moment. Firmer arms, a more stable posture, and a slow, flowing breath, all reflected 2 years of discipline, but also 2 years of longing. When he grasped the microphone again, there was a pause. Not out of hesitation, but out of a sudden return of memory, as if the stage he'd once left was calling him home. 2 years, another first time, he said quietly, almost as if admitting something to himself. The staff exchanged glances, not out of surprise, but because they knew how significant this moment was for him. He stood slowly, tapped his in-ears, and then instructed with a calm, controlled composure. For the second verse, soften the background. Raise the mid-range a little. Let the main sound rise more, he said without hesitation. It seemed simple, but it conveyed how deeply Taehyung understood the character of his voice. Enlistment might separate him from the stage, but never from his musicality. When the instrumental resumed, he tilted his head, listening to every detail. Just a little more, yes. That. Nothing sounded like someone who hadn't held a microphone in 2 years. His precision and artistry were as refined as ever, even more mature. And finally, he sang. One note. One line. It was enough to make the entire room stop moving. His voice, still warm, but now it had a new depth. There was a texture that could only be born from time, from longing, from experience. Even though it was just a warm-up, the staff immediately noticed one thing. Taehyung hadn't lost anything. He'd come home a stronger version of himself. As soon as he entered Love Me Again, the room shifted, as if he'd been pulled into a private concert. Every vibrato felt more emotional. Every low note sounded rounder and more stable. Every transition into falsetto felt seamless, without a hint of tension. It was as if the 2 years hadn't been a distance, but a process of refinement. But in the midst of his extraordinary performance, he suddenly chuckled. It's so strange, holding a mic again, he said with a warm smile. The staff laughed along, but everyone knew it wasn't just a playful smile. There was relief, nostalgia, a genuine joy that couldn't be hidden. The next run-through went more smoothly. He walked in front of the full-length mirror, watching how his voice followed the movements of his body. He adjusted his pace, rhythm, and expression. Even when he paused, his breathing remained steady, displaying the control only experienced performers possess. Turn the reverb down a bit. The low end should be drier. The right in-ear should be turned up a bit. The harmonics should be clearer. His instructions flowed like water, regular, precise, and full of feeling. Each adjustment wasn't merely technical, but emotional. Love Me Again wasn't just a song to sing, it was a safe space he was reviving. Each time he repeated the chorus, his voice grew more alive. There were moments when he closed his eyes, completely lost, and the entire studio felt like it was drowning in the sound. No cameras, no fans, no stage, just Taehyung and the music that had become part of his soul. When he attempted the bridge, his voice transformed into something raw, more personal, more touching. Several staff members subconsciously rubbed their arms, goosebumps rising. No one had expected a simple rehearsal to feel so intimate. After a few repetitions, he sat down on the floor again, this time not to center himself, but to reflect. The microphone was still in her hand, but she remained silent, staring at the floor as if recollecting all the memories of the stage she'd been away from for 2 years. Tired, but happy. Calm, but filled with emotion. Meanwhile, until finally he said softly, one more time. And that final run was the definition of an artist returning home. His voice was full, warm, alive. There was no tension, no hesitation, just honesty. And as soon as he finished, the room fell silent for a few seconds before the staff broke into a soft round of applause. Not because of formality, but because they were witnessing the rise of someone who truly loved the stage. Taehyung got up, patted his clothes, smiled faintly, and said almost in a whisper, "It feels really good to be back." And with that, the rehearsal was over. But the atmosphere didn't leave. The moment lingered in the air, a sign that what was to come on Jin's stage would be more than just a performance, but a new chapter in the journey of an artist who had grown, matured, and returned with a bigger heart than ever. Taehyung, after 2 years, wasn't just back. He was back as the best version of himself.